Kansas City stories of Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. KC Cares is the intersection of the nonprofit and profit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. KC Cares is proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggest. Kansas City has a nonprofit institution that for more than 75 years has been focused on using science and technology to create solutions to help make the world safer, healthier, and more sustainable. And this institution has been right in the vortex of helping battle the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. It's the Midwest Research Institute, better known as MRI Global, and we're welcoming Dean Gray, who's the Vice President of Defense and Health. Welcome, Dean. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, thanks, Ruth. It's great to be here with you today.
Well, I think making an introduction of Vice President of Defense and Health, that sounds like serious stuff.
Yeah, I guess it does sound like serious stuff. Kind of take it for granted sometimes. But I guess, defense and health and also energy in there for MRI Global. It's a big part of what we do here, and we're proud of it. So, yeah, happy to talk about any of these things.
Well, I would guess that a lot of people are familiar with hearing Midwest Research Institute, may have driven by your big space down on Volcker Boulevard, I believe. Give us that peek inside. What is going on in that building? What are you all about?
Oh, sure. Well, in your introduction, Ruth, you mentioned that MRI Global's been here for more than 75 years, and it is. It's around 77 years now. So at the close of 1944, MRI Global was founded by some civic leaders to really, I think, do their part for the Midwest to try to remain a viable science and research organizational and innovation entity here in the Midwest at the close of World War II, and try to retain brain power around the Midwest and also tie into federal contracts and growth opportunities that were available at the time. And we've been here ever since, part of the fabric of Kansas City since then. They're big parts, big chunks of what we do in national security and defense, global health, and also in renewable energy, just, right here in Kansas City.
Well, I was reading some of the history of MRI, and it was fun to look at some of the old pictures as well. I mean, what forward-thinking leaders to, even before the war was over, to have this kind of forethought and vision of how can we keep these great brains right here and in what capacity. Is much time spent, talking about the roots of where MRI has come from?
Yeah, I'd say that the things that some of the founding principles are just a big part of our culture that we try to retain. And that is that really strong sense of mission and being a part of the community, but definitely, with our customers, mostly in the federal government, not exclusively, but a lot of our customers in the federal government, just knowing that the weight of the research that we do and the intensity of it sometimes really has this, not just a local and a national, but a global impact to it. And, to think back of the reasons of why was MRI Global founded? It's something that we definitely do think about. We're right in the middle of putting together our next 10-year strategic plan too, and these things come up to the surface again. There are several of us around the institute that are kind of students of our strategic planning process back to the 40s, and I'm one of those, and I'm fascinated by it. About how do we think about innovation there? How do we think about some of the constraints and the context around our business and in the community at the time? I look at every strategic plan that has been put together by the Institute, and the one that we're working on now it's like a time capsule, and making sure that we maintain that understanding of that strong sense of why we do what we do and the importance of it. And then try to make sure we instill that in our staff and also in our community. It's very important to us, Ruth.
Well, now I want to take a peek and let's really dive into what goes on at MRI. Kind of share or explain, if you will, the buckets or the sectors of what MRI is all about.
Okay. Yeah. Right now we have about 7 different sectors that we end up working in, but if you kind of raise them up, you get defense and health. Then we've got and I'll talk about those in a second, but we also, I don't want to forget, with your viewers here, that right here in Kansas City, you've got an organization, MRI Global, that also manages the National Renewable Energy Laboratory for the Department of Energy in Golden, Colorado, and we have since its inception. And kind of starting there in the 1970s with the birth of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. It was the Solar Research Institute at the time, Solar Energy Research Institute. That is the only national laboratory with the Department of Energy or any other government function that has that specific responsibility for developing and deploying renewable energy technologies. So we have that we're a big part of, again, since it was formed. And then in our headquarters here in Kansas City, and then in our other locations in North Kansas City, in a Grandview field station that we have in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and Charlottesville, Virginia, we have our national security and defense and our global health areas. And underneath those, we have different customer sets and different market areas. But they're really dedicated to areas of like biosurveillance, diagnostics, threat detection, integrated defense systems, advanced technologies, a lot of things, as you can imagine, that are of great concern to our customers, both in the government and in the commercial space.
All the cool stuff.
I think it's cool. Yeah, I think, yeah.
When you say threat detection and bio.
Yeah. Yeah, we think it's really that. We definitely think that's cool and very, very impactful stuff. Yeah.
How does MRI go about then assembling a team to work in all these areas? Are they all scientists?
That's part of, I think, one of the types of value that we can bring to our customers. We talked about kind of the objectivity, the nonprofit status as being part of that value. The other is being able to have subject matter experts in life sciences, physical sciences, engineering, all on site, but our desire and our real diligence to seek out partnerships that are local with local universities, partnerships that are national with the leading class companies in different parts of market sectors that are really in the cutting edge of new equipment development. And I think also trying to bridge a gap. We can see this with a lot of our customers and a lot of our contracts, bridging the gap between big government needs and tying them together with some of the best minds in industry, with MRI Global being part of that, as well as almost in some cases being a scientific and an engineering interpreter between the different groups, since we understand how to run contracts in both government and also in the commercial space. There are a lot of technologies that are out there in the commercial space, but they just don't, I don't know how to say it better than some of them just don't know how to speak government language. Contracting with the government, we love working with the government, but they're a challenging customer, certainly. And with the rules and regulations that we end up following, and we're audited by so many different organizations, we have to end up really maintaining a level of diligence around our contracting and our scientific excellence. And I think that really helps kind of bridge this gap between some of the commercial solutions that are out there and what our government customers need.
You could probably monetize government speak and sell that as a commodity. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would really like to get in on the inside skinny of that.
Well, let me tell you that every organization, I think, has their own acronym soup that they eat every day, and we're no different. So here's my request, that if during our conversation, if I fall into throwing out acronyms that I'm not even thinking about, please call me out and say, Dean, what does that stand for? Because I'm going to really try not to have government speak during the conversation, and really be mindful of it.
Well, I remember at the start of the pandemic, you all becoming very forward-facing in the news by what you all were already kind of doing as an institution. Share with our audience a little bit. Take us back those 19, 20 some odd months and some of the things that were really newsworthy from you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a lot, but time has kind of flown by, and it's also crawled by as well. I kind of thinking about it two different ways, but we were already working in these areas prior to the COVID pandemic. So we were involved in MERS response, SARS-CoV-1 response, the Ebola epidemic eradication efforts, on the tip of the spear in West Africa, starting in 2014. I mean, so the policies, the procedures, the subject matter expertise, the laboratories, the investments, the customers, the partnership, we have all of that, and so when we were tracking what was happening at that point in time, we started to, do our best, I think, locally to start getting the word out about some things and start traveling around with a couple of our scientists and doing some panel sessions and trying to peel away the science and what we were heading into with the pandemic and some preparedness and outreach, and try to remove that from the politics at the time. Because there was an intermixing, and still is really, of the politics of the pandemic. And, as scientists here with a job to try to make the world better, it was our responsibility, we really felt like, to have more of a community outreach at that time, even more than we'd had in the past, to be able to help our partners here locally, help them with education, help them with biosafety development of practices and safe protocols as they were considering how they were going to not just weather this storm, but then also when they got into the point of bringing people or students, back to the workplace or the schoolroom, and doing some, I'd say, a lot more kind of public service that way. And it was really important, and it's helped to define, I think, our more recent stature in the community. And we're very proud of that. I mean, we care deeply about the Kansas City region and the partners that we've been able to work with here as part of their biosafety planning, come back to the office planning, like Kansas City Art Institute, Stowers, William Jewell College, Rockhurst University. Just to name a few. We care deeply about them, all of their students, all of their their workforce. And it's been a good partnership. And it gives me hope also that as we emerge from this pandemic and as we get into pandemic preparedness, that the community is going to have some of that muscle memory of how to respond and come together as a team to be able to respond.
One of the things I found fascinating was looking and reading about the Ebola. I'm going to give it the wrong name and the wrong term, but the total containment facility that you all created, that like a mobile unit. Can you share a little bit about it? I almost felt like I was reading science fiction, but it was real.
Yeah, when in the and those are some tools that we were already ready to deploy, and we did at the beginning of the pandemic. And we really, again, we kind of built a lot of that up during the earlier epidemics that were happening. So for the Ebola virus eradication in West Africa, at that point in time, around the 2014, 2015 timeframe, we were approached by our Department of Defense customers then with a real challenge for us, which was, look, the diagnostic tests that we have on site, the evaluation of the virus on site, it took too long. And we were having to bring a lot of people together in these communities and have them wait sometimes for days to be able to get a result of whether or not they were Ebola virus positive or negative. And, our customers, I think rightly so, thought at that point in time, are we endangering people there? Where if you don't go in with Ebola, but you're going to be exposed to it as part of this kind of like a mass gathering. And the challenge to us was we need a diagnostic test that can be deployed in a laboratory, self-contained, that we can drop off staff 24/7 in West Africa and be able to have it up and running in a week and cut the amount of time for a positive or negative diagnostic test from days to hours. And that's what we did. And, as part of that responsibility that we had, because we've been working in mobile laboratory space, really deploying deep forensic chemistry capabilities and also bioinformatics capabilities overseas for many, many years, taking all that together and then putting it towards this, solving the challenge of Ebola in West Africa that was a grand challenge for the Institute. Everybody came together. There was nothing more important for us to do and to help out the world at that point in time. And it does, I mean, it does kind of seem a little bit like science fiction, where you take this really sophisticated laboratory equipment and you put it all in a laboratory that you built into a specialized shipping container. You load it onto an airplane. You put staff who know how to operate in that environment along with that equipment. You fly them over, drop them off, set it up in one day with their own systems for water purification and for power. And you're up and running and you're helping to save lives almost right away. And it's just something that we can look back on, I think, and I think anybody in Kansas City in this area can look back on and say, wow, we really did something very impactful for the world. And, part of our responsibility there too with our customers was to then take that equipment and then help to train the ministries of health in the countries where we were and give them that equipment along with the training and support to provide infrastructure. So when it does end up happening again, that they're going to be better prepared. And we're very proud of that. So everything that we learned from that, all those muscles that we developed during that time period, we're able to almost immediately be able to put into use with the recent pandemic. Mobile laboratories became, hey, how can we make them more mobile? Make them into actually like trucks that can be driven around for the Kansas Department of Health and Environment to be able to reach rural Kansas communities for COVID-19 testing and now for vaccine distribution. How can we end up taking lessons learned from overseas and be able to provide those, and with the shorter turnaround periods right here in Kansas City with our own diagnostic laboratories on site, and then help our partners again with safe return to work plans or with testing for their workforce. All of these things feel like they just build on each other. Like that's how good science works. And that's how really good, talented people work too. And we learn from what we've done and it's our job to continue to get better.
In some ways, I feel like MRI Global is Kansas City's best kept secret. The world knows lots about it, and the pandemic just kind of reintroduced you to our community. We shouldn't have been asleep, but it's like here the organization is and doing all these fabulous things that now we're all having to confront. I want to ask you a little personal. How did you come to the organization? And I think your background in science and interest in all of this would be fascinating for our audience.
Well, I don't know if it'll be fascinating for your audience or not, but I'm happy to talk for a couple minutes about it. It was not a straight line, that's for sure. And I'm so grateful that I ended up here. Almost, like I said, it's been almost 20 years. I think 20 years in February, and I can't imagine a more fulfilling journey that I've had. That kind of started out on a very deep scientific track here, that then became one more of program management, and then where I am now, which is really helping teams and people achieve their goals for the Institute. And I just, every day is some sort of new adventure. But no, I didn't start there. My early background, I started as an archaeologist right out of undergraduate school. I spent some time in Central America, and, I figured that I was going to, that was going to be my trajectory, studying archaeology and tropical botany and stomping around the rainforest and figuring out if I could find the next new, medicinal plant. I was like, that's where I was in love with that area of research. I still am. I'm still jealous of anybody that gets to do that. But then I went to graduate school so I grew up in Ohio, but I went to graduate school then at the University of Missouri in Columbia, and started getting more interested in plant biology and plant physiology. And they had a great program there through the Department of Forestry that was also a tie-in with medicinal products chemists that they had in vet medicine and toxicology, and did my master's degree and PhD with them. And then moved away for a couple of years, about a year and a half, to work in industry. And then 9/11 happened. So we're coming up on the anniversary of 9/11. And as a lot of people, I think I know exactly where I was that morning when it happened. And it changed my career trajectory. I knew then that there were things that I had, or I felt that I had in my scientific background from probably the biology and the chemistry standpoint, that I could apply in a little different way. And that's when I decided I really wanted to work for a not-for-profit. I wanted to come back to the Midwest with a young family that we had at the time, And that's when even though we talk about best kept secrets, I mean, I'd been at University of Missouri in Columbia for 5 years, and I didn't know about Midwest Research Institute at the time until I moved to Oregon and then moved back and then interviewed with them here. And right in this building almost 20 years ago. And after that interview, my mind was made up. The quality of people that I talked to, understanding the mission, and I knew this is where I had to be. And like I said, the people who hired me at that time, Rich Brown, Roger Harris, others that are I'm forever grateful. They allowed me to get my foot in the door and now be able to be part of the great work that we do today. Yeah.
So this Ohio boy who wanted to go find medicinal plants in the rainforest ends up in Kansas City, and how lucky we are. You did mention how 9/11 was a seminal kind of a turning point for you. Once you came into the organization, was MRI Global involved with anything post 9/11 that you recall? Give us that touch point here 20 years later after that horrific day.
A lot of earlier research at MRI Global, it's always, not always, but a lot of it's been around environmental sampling, heavy analytical chemistry, certainly, and engineering, mechanical and electrical engineering. And then we've started to see in the last 20 years, maybe 25 years, more of a move into life sciences. And, we've always been doing biological research here, but even more and more life sciences has been a focus of ours. And after 9/11, we could see that some of our customer sets that were mostly in more of the National Institutes of Health, Environmental Protection Agency, National Institutes of Health, and Department of Health and Human Services is that top organization. They've been long time customers, but we did see a shift in what our customer needs were post 9/11, and that was more towards, I'd say, away from environmental sampling for, say, toxins and more towards biological and chemical threats. And that ended up becoming a very significant transition for us. And again, one of those where we were prepared for it because the infrastructure, the subject matter expertise that goes along with that kind of deep chemical and biological analyses we had. And so we've continued to build those over the last couple of decades. And there were other significant events that happened there too, which was getting, I guess, more in-depth relationships with our military customers and providing help for them on site in military bases too, where, sometimes it's just not feasible if you have a sample from the environment and you go, I don't know if this has a chemical threat or is there a biological threat? How does the intelligence tie in with this? And we can't just send it home and wait a week for the analysis to happen. So that's when we really started to put together the idea of how do we field these pieces of equipment and put them where the decisions need to be made to help out the warfighters. And so that was a big change for the Institute as well. And we've been building on that really even in the civilian capacity ever since. It's really, it's just been work that I think that we can all be proud of, really can all be proud of.
Where does MRI go from here? This is a crazy year, but I mean, you were talking about, their strategic planning and whatnot. Can you give us a little peek without revealing?
Oh, sure.
Secrets?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are areas in which we work they were important 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they're important today, and they're going to be important for the next 10 years. There's no question in our minds about that. We've got a response now, not just to, okay, so we're going to be emerging from this pandemic, and then it's about, pandemic preparedness. And it's about the search for new antivirals, therapeutics. And the customer sets that we have that are in the chemical threat detection, biological threat detection, development, as I mentioned, of new antiviral therapeutics. There are so many different areas that they're going to remain important going forward. Then we've got like the high technology areas that we're starting to work with our customers over the last couple of years: augmented reality, virtual reality, wearable sensors. Like now these are everywhere, whether you have a Garmin or an Apple Watch or whatever else. And be able to help our customers understand some of the data that is actually pulled off of these wearable monitoring systems. And you can think of in 10 years, what are we going to be now responding to? We're going to be responding to the effects of climate change. There are going to be large scale humanitarian efforts. There are going to be natural resource scarcity. What does that mean to our customers in terms of global instability? What does it mean in terms of the impact of additional zoonotic diseases, those diseases that transfer from animals to humans? Where does MRI Global then fit in this to help be able to continue to make the world a better place, in spite of all of those things that are kind of, those threats that are kind of lining up against us? It's our responsibility to continue to do everything that we can to help the world become a better place, to solve those challenging problems with our customers and to respond to these threats as they emerge and help with preparedness as well. There's a lot on the horizon, not just for us, but for all of Kansas City. We've got a lot of partners around this area who are also, really ready to dig in and help our country.
So you guys deal with the scary stuff so we can sleep. Just want to thank you for that. Or figuring out a way, once the scary stuff is there, how to deal with it and how to cope with it and all of that. I did want to go back before we end our conversation, because you mentioned you really wanted to work for a nonprofit. Why was that?
I spent it's important to me, and it's a personal thing. I spent about a year and a half. I call it my industrial postdoc. That's what I called it right out of grad school, where I worked for a for-profit company that was selling lines of products and medicinal chemistry products and so forth. And a great company, no issue at all. But there was also that pull of you're supporting a product. And I knew then in my career, and especially with, what we talked about, kind of that transition of mindset around 9/11 and the focus on being of service to our country and to our people and to the world, it seemed that the nonprofit status is really, that's what it's geared towards. It is that objectivity. And I wanted that in my professional career. I still want that in my professional career, to bring solutions to bear. And the only concern that you have is not necessarily selling a product or something. You're selling a solution for a customer that needs your help. And there's just something that was really attractive to me about that 20 years ago. And it's just as attractive or more attractive to me now. I feel like that's our calling. And and like I said, I've got nothing but gratitude for that, to be able to move into this area.
Best part of your job? Go. Nothing like throwing you.
No, easy, super easy. Our staff. That it's the best part of our job. There's nothing that gets done here. I get to talk to you and talk about all the great things that MRI Global does. And I want to make sure then that it is not me that's doing every one of these things at all. It is I get to be, in this case, an ambassador for the work that MRI Global does, because our staff end up doing this every day. During the pandemic, they came in and they worked in the laboratories. They helped run other samples, at their own risk, to be able to provide support to the customers who needed it the most. And they did that because it was part of our mission. It was just kind of built into the DNA of the company and the people who work here. I'll never think twice about that when I'm asked. It is our staff, 100%. They make the Institute what it is. And I can't thank them enough, really. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Do you ever miss just being that scientist, though, out there with the plants? And
yeah, I do. Some of the funnest meetings that I get to have during any week is when I get to sit down with a project team and just dig into some of the details of, hey, how's this project going? And then I can't stop myself from trying to come up with solutions. So well, if you guys tries this, and they're generally, I've been, I think, a smart leader in ways that I know it's always best to hire people that are smarter than you in areas. So, but I think they humor me when I'm in those meetings, or yeah, Dean, we did think of that one, but no, I love, science is still, that's why, when we take a pause and we think about why we're doing what we're doing, and then kind of step back from it and then realize that, the pride I feel about being able to be a scientist, that also kind of fuels our desire here at the Institute to help others get into STEM fields and also help create more diversity in STEM fields and be able to spread the message. it's something I love dearly. Yeah. And I do miss it.
Glad you get to dabble just a little bit. Thank you. It's Dean Gray with MRI Global. We appreciate your time and sharing this great institution in Kansas City.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having us on here. Really, I just had a great time talking with you today.
Thank you for listening to Casey Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications, and we're proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. To be a guest on Casey Cares or underwriting opportunities, please visit our website at caseycaresonline.org. And you can spread the love. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Casey Cares Radio and on Instagram at Casey Cares Online. And catch us on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Thank you for joining us on Casey Cares.